Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are hangingontohope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given. All right. Well, hello, everyone. This is Karen W., and on today's show, we have Christine Woolgar, author of the blog article we will be discussing called Why Love and Respect's Chairs acronym isn't about genuine respect. So this book is going to kind of talk a lot about the Love and Respect book. So welcome to the podcast, Christine.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes, we're talking to her all the way from England, so we're excited.
It's good to talk to you too. It's always good to connect with people who share common interests and are kind of working in this space. So thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you so much for writing your blog. I just thought it made some excellent points. Love and Respect was just one of the most damaging books that we read. We studied that book probably more than any other marriage book. We studied it over and over. We listened to the conference more than once because we did it in a church setting, and we also went to the conference. Wow. And I sought it out. I'm the one because I heard him on Focus on the Family, and I'm like, oh, he's always saying he needs respect. So I sought it out, and that's what makes me angry now, so many years away from that, realizing that I sought it out, and I was thinking that this was a book that was going to help us, and I definitely think it caused more damage than helping me. So, and you say in your blog that you did not actually read the book Love and Respect, but you wrote your blog based on Sheila Gregor's her article about the book, which we've had them on the show too, because I love her book.
Yeah.
The Great Sex Rescue. So, and your blog really resonated with a lot of people, because I know you probably got a lot of feedback on it, because there's just so many people that were affected by that and that were in abusive relationships. So do you want to share a little more about your inspiration for writing that blog?
Sure. So Love and Respect is, fortunately, I don't think it is as well read here in the UK as it is in the States. And so I hadn't actually read it myself, as you said, but I have been following a lot of Sheila Gregoire's work. And she wasn't the first person I'd read who said that some of the messaging, it was damaging. And what I really appreciated about Sheila's work was that she did a rubric of 7 Christian marriage books and 7 Christian sex books, some of which I had been told I should read and stuff. And Love and Respect in that rubric scored 0 out of a possible 48. So you score 0 on one of her 12 categories if the book actively promotes harmful teaching. And because of the other books that were in that rubric, I was very interested in it. So that was kind of one train of thought. But the other train of thought was I actually went to the cinema with my husband just before Christmas to watch the new Bond film. And, with a film like that, you get a lot of high-end adverts for like cars and watches and stuff. And I remember just watching these adverts and I thought, hang on a second. Growing up, everybody told me that like sex sells, that's what people put into all of these adverts. And I thought, no. They're not trying to sell sex. They're trying to sell status. It's just that we attribute status to sex. It's like, you are somebody if you're having sex. And it was that kind of light bulb moment that I had in the back of my head when a few weeks later, a friend of mine was complaining about a meme she'd seen on Instagram where this guy was saying, oh, if you don't respect men, it's like you're assaulting their manhood. And I'm like, wait, what? No. If somebody is saying that, they're talking about status. They're not talking about individual worth as a human being made in the image of God. They're talking about ego. And I thought, I am not here for that. And as I was chewing over this, I came back to Sheila's work and I came back to this whole love and respect thing and the CHAIRS acronym. And I looked at it and I thought, this is about status. This is about ego. This isn't about actually valuing people as human beings. And I thought, right, I'm going to deconstruct it. And so I wrote the post.
That's great.
That is. And you made some really good points in that too. So, and that's so true, what you said. I mean, I can see it now, but I couldn't see it then when I was so into that book because I thought, no, this book's going to help us. That's what makes me mad about it now because I didn't see that then.
And it's so difficult when you're being habitually lied to.
Yes, it is.
And then you get those light bulb moments and you realize, no, wait, actually, I've been assuming, I've been believing, I've been trusting that I've been fed the truth here, but What if that's not the case? And that's a very unsettling feeling, because you think, wait, what do I do next? Where can I find the truth? What is true? Is anything true? And so it's really difficult to kind of find that solid ground again. And you can undermine your trust in a lot of things, which might be good things. So I think for anybody who feels bad about believing lies, believing untruths, it's like, this is something that happens to many people. And just because you believed it, that doesn't make it your fault.
Yeah,
and there are, fortunately, people out there like Sheila, like yourselves, who want to speak the truth into the darkness to bring about some light and to help you kind of come to a place where you can see the truth and evaluate what you're hearing and hold on to what is good.
Yes, absolutely.
That's great. Hi, this is Brenda J. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
We'll just get right into it and start with the opening quote from your blog.
Mm-hmm.
So, I have a theory about this whole idea that women want love, but men want respect. In short, the people who promote this notion use the word respect to mean something different to what I think it means. If you're new to this whole love versus respect controversy, it's easy to find in Christian circles thanks to popular marriage book by Emerson Eggerichs. The title, Love and Respect. Eggerichs sets out his aim in the first paragraph. This book is about how the wife can fulfill her need to be loved by giving her husband what he needs. Respect. Did you want to expound on that at all?
I think this aim of the book is very one-sided. He's just like, oh, well, if women can do this for men, then men will respond positively, is kind of his aim with the book. And if you set out with that aim, then you can kind of see a little bit of why he didn't talk about women's pleasure, for example. But I think setting out to write a book about marriage that is so one-sided in its aim, I think is a really unhelpful thing to do. It's like, he might be like, oh, no, I never said that. Or like, just because I didn't say this, it's like, oh, you're missing the point of the book. You can get a lot of that. But actually, if you're going to write a decent marriage book, you've got to be writing something about both spouses, about mutual behaviors. I think it was not a good idea to have an aim purely about how one spouse can just meet the needs of the other. And of course, he talks about it as a need. And I think will be challenging whether or not this really is about need.
Well, and it is double damaging when you're married to someone that is abusive, like I was. Then they use that totally against you, and it did so much damage.
Yeah, and it's usually the wife that reads the marriage books, I mean, I think this was one of the, maybe there was another marriage book, but I know he loved this title because that's what he's like, I don't feel respected. So he loved it, but we went over it so many times that at one point I was getting frustrated. I mean, I was starting to the light bulb was starting to come on dimly when I look back and say, it's not just called respect, it's called love and respect. But of course it's not, he doesn't focus a lot on the other part, like you're saying. It's very one-sided. There's not a lot in there for the man to say, this is how you can really love your wife. I mean, he talks about wearing pink sunglasses and blue sunglasses and how men and women see things differently. And so he kind of frames things a lot in that, in that way of talking about it.
And the thing is, different people see different things differently. And it's not necessarily a sex or a gender thing. It's a case of, you get the feeling that he's got a quite narrow or a blinkered view of men and masculinity. And similarly with women. And it's like, it's about certain types of men and certain attitudes amongst men and certain types of women, rather than actually looking at us holistically as human beings.
Right. I mean, that's why I feel like it's so important to talk about now, because if there's still people that are seeking this book to, you know, in that kind of a situation, it's going to hurt them a lot more than it's going to help them.
Yeah. And I think that whole, because I did have a very long conversation with two friends of mine about a different marriage book, and they were like, well, it's not great, but it's kind of fine. And I said, no, it's got so many gaps. People are going to fill in the gaps. With their kind of culture and their assumed knowledge and their what has sort of come to them through cultural osmosis. And I go, when you fill in those gaps for yourself, they aren't always what the author intended. I mean, they might be, but they also might not be, and they may well be harmful. And if we've been given bad messaging, and there is a gap in a book or a gap in a message, and we fill it in with that bad messaging we've received, then everything becomes that much more damaging for us because of how we apply it in our lives. Right. Yeah. So I think that's why it's really important not just to say true things, but also to say true things that actively combat harmful messages.
Yes.
Yeah, it was so harmful to me that I became to the point where I didn't feel like a human being. And at the very beginning, you talk about respecting people as human beings. And so this is where it's so damaging.
And there was that quote, you know, sometimes people use the word respect to mean treat somebody like a human being. Other people might use the word respect to mean treat like an authority. And then they say,
That's
oh,
what
if
my ex-husband did. Yep.
yeah. And they go, well, if you don't respect me, I won't respect you. And what they mean by that is, well, if you don't treat me as an authority, I won't treat you as a human being. And which is really asymmetrical, but because they're using the word respect both times, they think they're being fair, but they aren't. Yeah.
And that's the whole theme of the Love and Respect is like, that's why I thought, oh, this is going to be the book that's really going to help us, because the whole theme is like, well, if you just respect the man and he feels respected, then you're going to get that love that you've been just wanting all along, but it didn't turn out that way.
But that makes a lot of sense, what you just said, respect as an authority. That is so damaging. And the last podcast we just did on the dynamics of abuse, there can't be that power and control like over you. Yeah. It's not an authority thing. So
yeah, we can use words with particular definitions in different, or different definitions in different contexts or for different purposes, and some people, you respect somebody if you're like, kind of, you really, really value their opinion. And that is different to valuing somebody as a human being, and sometimes we can have these different definitions. But where the problem comes in is when the way that you use the word respect is just imbued with entitlement. Mm-hmm. It's like, I want you to make me feel like an important person just because. I want you to make me feel like an important person in a way that you are not important. I want you to be stroking my ego. And when that sense of entitlement gets imbued into your understanding of how you understand respect, that's where it gets toxic.
Yes. Right. And that's exactly how my abusive marriage was.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
You're out of it now.
Me here. I'm out. I'm out. So
we're both out now. So I'll just briefly read the chair so that anyone that hasn't read the book or is not familiar with the book at all, we can kind of get into that a little bit. So he uses the acronym CHAIRS, CHAIRS, to describe how a husband feels when he's respected, which is what supposedly the goal of the book is. So C is conquest, appreciate his need to work and achieve. H is hierarchy, appreciate his desire to protect and provide. A is authority, appreciate his desire to serve and to lead. Insight, appreciate his desire to analyze and counsel. Relationship, appreciate his desire for shoulder-to-shoulder friendship. And sexuality, appreciate his desire for sexual intimacy. So you say in your article, what I want to show you is how each one of these is arguably more about self-importance than self-worth, kind of like you're talking about that authority. Yeah. So we can kind of just go into a little bit of all those.
Yeah. So the first one is conquest. And he says conquest is like appreciate his need to work and achieve. And the thing is, I'm not against work. I'm not against achievement. You can read the Genesis creation story. God worked, God rested, God took satisfaction in the goodness of his creation. That's fine. But that's not conquest. Okay. And conquest is when you've got an adversary and you've got an enemy and you're like getting on top of them. You're beating them. And the Bible does have a lot to say about that. But the context of the Bible and God conquering is that God doesn't conquer humanity. God conquers evil and death. That is what God has victory over and what Jesus has victory over. And that is not what we have in a marriage, not what we have in everyday life. Okay. Everyday life is not about the final defeat of all evil. It's about getting on with people. And so our work and our achievement, we should be able to relate that to our everyday life, not this ultimate conquest. So I just think conquest is a very militant, very aggressive to be using. And I think it seems to me that it's more about being the person on top. That's what I think Eggerichs is associating with this word conquest, is like, being on top of stuff. And it's like,
yeah. And in that position that tend to be more of the abusive, authoritative type, they probably like that word because, like you're saying, it's a military term. It's like, yes, conquest. I want my wife to conquest. I don't know. I mean, I see it now from a different perspective.
Well, even these next two, hierarchy and authority, seem very similar.
Yeah. And and the thing is, sorry, just going before we get onto hierarchy and authority, the thing about the C, if he really wants to talk about achievement and work, I would put in collaboration, because when you feel like you're collaborating with people, it is you feel great because you're achieving something bigger than you could do on your own.
Yeah.
That's really good. I think you should put that in there. I like it much better. Much better.
Yeah, it's great. So then we get hierarchy, and it's just like that one is almost, it speaks for itself. And he says it's appreciate his desire to protect and provide. And it's like, again, this seems to be about status. It's like, I want to be the provider with a capital P. I want to be the protector with a capital P. And it's like, when you protect someone and when you provide for them, you don't do that for the status of it. You do it for the other person so that they may be well and good. Your ego shouldn't be in the picture here. It's like these are verbs that have outcomes. They're meant to achieve something. They're not status symbols. And so it's interesting that he used the word hierarchy rather than say helper. You know, helper has got a lot less status.
I like helper way better.
Yeah. And it carries the same kind of overtones of actually working for another person's good, which is what protection and provision should be for. But of course, helper sounds a lot more there's a lot less glamour associated with the word helper than there is with.
It's about treating someone like a human being again, that this hierarchy leaves that out, right?
Right.
It allows you to leave that out. Yeah. It puts the emphasis on status.
Yes.
And then authority, appreciate his desire to serve and to lead. That kind of goes along with it. I mean, that's just a lot of characteristics that you have in an abusive type relationship.
Yeah.
On that.
And I think this is a kind of really tricky one that we get in the church, because when you have parts of the church that believe that, you know, men should lead and women should submit, they kind of know that Jesus became like a servant. It's like they can't ignore him washing his disciples' feet. They kind of can't ignore when he said to his disciples, well, if you want to become great, you've got to serve the least of these. They know they can't ignore that. So they kind of think, well, if we're going to be leaders, how can we kind of still maintain this status of leader, but without looking like we're completely ignoring what Jesus taught? And then you get this kind of idea of servant leadership. And I can see the point that when you are in a position of leadership and you're in a position of power, really you want to be using your power to serve other people. And there are some people who see their role in society, their position in society as something that they should use to serve other people. It is not about themselves. And I can kind of get that. The thing about it is that Eggerichs seems to be putting this under the umbrella of authority. And the thing about authority is that it throws in this undercurrent, and I appreciate, this is my interpretation of what he wrote. Okay. But it puts in this undercurrent of assumed righteousness. Like, so it's not a case of, I happen to be given a position of power and now I want to use that power to serve, and as the person who's actually in this position, I have the authority to make decisions that other people will not have. It's not about that. The authority that he seems to be getting at here is this feeling of, I am kind of inherently worthy of this authority because I kind of know what's best. I've got this kind of righteousness in my decision making that other people do not have, would not have. And when you make me feel like I have righteousness in my authority to make decisions, I'm going to feel respected. And that is, it's hard to describe why I kind of spent the most words in my blog post on this letter. And I've probably why I've talked so long about it. But the thing is, when people who feel entitled, when they assume that they are in the right and that they know what's best for other people, it breeds abuse. Mm-hmm. It really does. I was reading a book called Coercive Control, and this guy, he'd studied a lot of domestic abuse cases, and he said, yeah, the abuser, they believe themselves to be more right, more rational, more reasonable. Mm-hmm. You know? And if that's what he's getting at, it's this whole feeling of, oh, no, I'm making decisions for your own good. I know. And it stifles the voices and the autonomy of other people.
Right.
So I just think to try and frame kind of leadership and serving and like kind of under authority, I think you're mixing together different things that actually, it's like he's trying to make a righteous version of something that's actually can be very, very abusive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not only does it breed abuse, but those that are already abusers use this to become more abusive.
Right. It justifies their thinking.
Oh, yeah. I had to submit to that authority, and it just squashed me, and I just never became who I was supposed to be and my purpose in Christ at all because of that. And now I finally can. So.
Yeah, I think the way you're explaining it, to me, it's like my light bulbs are going off because I'm like, well, no wonder this was more harmful.
Yeah.
Because it just revalidated what he wanted.
Yeah.
So it makes so much sense the way you're explaining it. So then,
the next one's insight. Appreciate his desire to analyze and counsel.
Yeah. And again, the sort of on the surface of it, there's nothing wrong with this, but in context, it's like he's going for the status of a trusted advisor rather than the ability to give insight. The thing about this is that everybody's different and different people will offer different perspectives, and you don't have to be intelligent. You don't have to be, the world's best advisor to be able to offer a different perspective. And sometimes I think, Jesus said, like, the kingdom of heaven belongs to children. And sometimes I think that's because they can offer us different perspectives. They can give us truths that make us think, wow, I really should have known that. And that's not because they are these great intelligent people yet. They may be very young. And it's not because, they're the greatest trusted advisors. It's not about status. It's a case of actually, if you've got a different perspective, you can offer insight to something. I think it is fair to say that if you feel like your insight is valued, I think that's fair. I think that's good. But I think we should value people's insight, not because they're trusted advisors necessarily or intelligent people. It's like, we should value their insight because they're giving us a different perspective. I agree with the word insight here, but I disagree with his definition where he says that wives should appreciate his desire to analyze and counsel.
Abusers use it to say, what I say goes. That's how it was used in my life. Because I appreciated the desire to analyze and counsel, but no one else was able to have an opinion, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think going back to the authority, I think what you're describing there is about a complete disregard of other people's autonomy. And I am a big believer that we should be respecting people's agency and autonomy. That doesn't mean that we necessarily agree with everything that they do. And there are situations where sometimes we have to put curbs on people's freedoms, but those situations are not the norm for a marriage. They are not the norm for a healthy
marriage anyway.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry. Thank you. Well, they should not be the norm for marriage, and they are definitely not the norm for a healthy marriage.
I almost forgot we're talking about a marriage book right now, which is making this
a Christian
sad.
Marriage book.
I feel like we're talking about, like, what is this? Like,
I know.
Wait a minute. What are we?
That's
we're talking about a marriage book. This is. I thought this was a book on authority
or leadership book.
World leadership or something. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah, that's what blows my mind now. That's why I think it's so important to talk about. But the R is relationship. Appreciate his desire for shoulder to shoulder friendship.
Yeah. Okay. And my thing with this one was, it's the way he says kind of shoulder to shoulder. And again, this is my interpretation. Shoulder to shoulder can mean fine, can be absolutely fine. But when I read it in context again, it feels like he just wants to feel big with his mates. It's like he wants the kind of friendship where he can walk into a room and his wife is right there next to him and he feels fantastic about it. And that's the overtone that I read into how he's describing shoulder to shoulder here. It's not really about relationship in the sense of reciprocity. It's not really about, the interactions between the husband and the wife. It's about kind of entering the room and everyone's like, oh, wow, look at those two together.
Status.
And the last one, sexuality. Appreciate his desire for sexual intimacy.
Yeah. So the thing that people often talk about give and take in sex. And I think it's problematic terminology because in sex, you can give and you can receive, but you can take and you can also be taken from. And people can desire sexual intimacy and that's fine. But you got to think about where is that desire coming from and what is that desire actually trying to achieve? Because, a man can desire to kind of take sexual satisfaction from other human beings. And that is very problematic. But if you talk about desire for sexual intimacy, it's about desire to celebrate each other in the act of sexual intercourse, then you're talking about something very different because you're talking about celebration and you're celebrating each other. So again, it's mutual. And I just felt like this phrase sort of desiring sexual intimacy was just a bit ambiguous because it leaves so many things open for interpretation and so many gaps. And actually, sex shouldn't be about stroking a person's ego. It shouldn't be about alleviating their anxiety. It should be about celebrating each other. and that being a rewarding experience. And even if it's not equally rewarding for both parties every single time, the point is that the relationship is mutually rewarding for both people. So, sometimes he might enjoy it more than her. Sometimes she might enjoy it more than him. There is a lot about giving and receiving and feeling free to receive without feeling like you have to offer something back. I think when you have a good, healthy sex life, you find a rhythm that works for both of you. It's not about everything being absolutely equal at all times in all ways. It's about the ebb and the flow of it so that you can enjoy it and he can enjoy it. And at no time do you feel taken from. At no time do you feel sidelined or your consent or your agency disregarded. You might not enjoy it hugely because you're wanting to give to your spouse, but even when you're in that situation, it shouldn't feel damaging to you. It shouldn't feel like you're being degraded and damaged at the same time or harmed. That's not what it should be about.
Yeah. And then he doesn't even he basically says that women don't even have needs. I mean, he doesn't address the women at all. And I look back and think, why did that not send off warning signals? But again, all the culture I was kind of caught up in kind of teaches that they don't emphasize the women's needs at all. It's always, please the man. And it's like,
and then it's like, well, why is that such a need for men to be pleased sexually? I mean, the implication is that if he isn't pleased, then he'll wander off or he will wallow in a pit of despair. And it's just like, oh my goodness.
No, I was completely trained by my ex-husband through scripture and through whatever books he read, that if I didn't please him, that's just how men were, and that they needed it within every 3 days, or that he was going to go other places and cheat, which he did anyway, even though I was trained to just do whatever he said.
Right.
And this is sad. That is exactly what happened to me. So I never turned him down. If I was too tired at 3 a.m. with 3 kids, it was like I was a horrible person. If there was one time where I just didn't have the energy, and that was few and far between over a 22-year period. I was fully trained to please him.
Yeah, I was too, because all the books I were reading, that's what the focus was on all the time.
Yeah.
So
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, now I've got boys that I have to try to explain that no, you shouldn't be objectifying women.
Yeah, it's like you're saying, it should be a celebration of each other where it's this mutual expression.
Yeah,
to me, sex is to me, sex is supposed to be a beautiful thing where it is this mutual, you're celebrating the love that you have for each other. And that's what it should be about. And that's what
it's all fear-based. And then he ended up having an affair anyway. And doing things he shouldn't have done the entire time. Pornography and everything, even though I did everything I was supposed to do.
Yeah. And it's really interesting that you say, it was all fear-based. And when I was in the early stages of my marriage, I was afraid to say no. I kind of never said that I wanted sex. Sometimes I just said, I'm not sure. And other times I said, I don't know. But both of those responses, if I was truly honest with myself, both of them were, actually, I don't want to have sex. I sort of, wheedled about a bit and I consented when I probably shouldn't have consented. And certainly my body wasn't ready for it. And then I'd be miserable afterwards. And then he would be like, wait, I want you to enjoy sex. He was distressed at seeing my distress afterwards. And because of how he responded, I then opened up a bit more. I said, well, actually, truth is, I don't want to have sex because I get nothing out of it and I feel horrible afterwards. And then I offered him a divorce and he was like, wait, what? Yeah, this is a two-way relationship here. I should be willing to give you commitment, even if right now you don't want to have sex with me. And I was like, wow, okay. And it took a bit more convincing, but then we eventually applied to have sex therapy and we got the sex therapy. And then we were able to find ways in which we could enjoy sex. Far from being in that place where I felt afraid to say no, there are times when he might be like, oh, could we? And I'd be like, oh, okay. But I don't say that because I'm afraid. And overall, in that particular moment, I might not hugely enjoy it, but I don't feel harmed by it. I don't come away feeling horrible about it. I don't do it because I'm afraid. And I also know that as soon as he's done, he's like, is there anything I can do for you? He often asks me if I'd like an orgasm. And that's kind of how it should be. It's about a rhythm. It's not about the particular moment so much as having a relationship and a sex life whereby you are free from fear and you both are able to enjoy each other. And that I'm very grateful to God. That's what I'm able to enjoy right now.
Yeah, that's great that he's loving, to you in that way.
Yeah. And you know what? Like what we share actually should be a lot more normative. It's
right,
like if it is 3 a.m. and I'm like, oh, okay then. Okay, great. And if it's 3 a.m. and I'm like, no, I'm too tired. And the last time he asked me, I was like, no, I'm too tired. He's fine with it. He doesn't get this bruised ego. He doesn't mope about. He doesn't hold it over me. He doesn't bring it up again. He doesn't count the days. I don't count the days. That's just not there.
I had 3 kids in 5 years, so there were just some times where I was a little bit tired and still didn't say no.
Yeah.
So I give myself kudos, okay? I'm like, wait a minute, how did I even function?
Yeah. Yeah. I was doing the same thing because I read all those books that were like, okay, you need to, this is how you have a great marriage.
And the thing that I say to people is that marriage doesn't give you a right to sex. What it gives you is a right to ask for sex. And if I'm in the workplace, a colleague comes up to me and he says, oh, can I have sex with you? I'm going to be offended just for asking. Who cares if he actually tried to have sex with me? Just him asking is inappropriate because we're not in a relationship and he knows I'm married and is just totally not going to go there. You know, possibly sexual harassment possibly gets reported to HR. Okay. But if I'm at home and I'm with my husband and he's like, oh, can I have sex? I'm not offended by him asking because as my spouse, he has that right to ask, but I have the right to say, not this time.
Yeah.
Because you know, marriage doesn't give you a right to sex. It gives you a right to ask for it. And I would like to think that in the overall balance and in the rhythm of our married life, we get to have enough sex that both of us can enjoy. But at no point that rhythm is not threatened by an instance where I'm like, not this time. Or he's like, not this time, dear.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. I want to kind of close with one of the last, this is a quote from your blog, because I thought this is really good too. It says, there are plenty of wives and women out there who have been unfairly put down and whose trust has been betrayed. They don't need a lesson in respect that regulates their needs and well-being beneath their husband's ease and comfort. At best, it makes women more vulnerable to harm. But at worst, it harms women. It harms marriages, and it tells men to link their self-esteem to ego and status. And you know what? That's not the gospel. I thought that was a great quote from your blog.
Thank you. Yeah, humility is what we need here, and on both sides. And when people haven't been fed that message of entitlement, but they have been fed a message of being lesser or being lower or whatever, and they get told that actually somebody else is more entitled than them, it wreaks havoc. It kind of coerces them into saying yes to things that they don't want to say yes to. And I think that was one of the things that completely surprised me when I got married, because I was a very confident person. I was a very outgoing person. And until I married, I didn't imagine that I would be unable to say no. But then in many ways, a very lovely, if unsuccessful honeymoon. My sex ed was like through the floor. I didn't know how to have sex at all. And you know, and he hadn't had sex either. So it took us a week to kind of get anywhere at all. But then for some reason, like kind of we came home and I didn't feel like I could say no. And that wasn't because he told me you can't say no to me. He never said that. It was just this message that had come in. And fortunately, he never did try and play that. Oh, yeah, you can't say no to me. You've got to respect me. He never played that card. But even though he didn't play that card, I still felt under pressure. And it was because I was miserable and because he was so concerned about the fact that I was miserable and that he was so continually loving and continually gentle. It was like, oh, wait a minute. Actually, maybe I can be honest with this guy. And he still wanted to stay married to me, even though I wasn't giving him any sex. And it's like, wow. Not what I expected. But,
well, that just gives us hope, Karen. Once again, you've inspired us because it gives us hope. That's all we're going to say.
That's definitely, if I ever have another relationship again or get married again, the number one quality I'm looking for is humility. Kind of like what you're talking about. That's so important because pride is not attractive at all. It's a turnoff, but humility is very attractive.
And I'm looking for someone that will treat me the way I deserve to be treated.
Yeah.
Like a human being.
Right.
Completely.
Yeah.
So I hope it sounds like it exists, right?
Oh, it does. Yes.
Oh my. Well, thank you so much for writing this blog post and to break down the damaging message that can cause further damage to an already abusive situation. This is important to talk about. Where can our listeners read your blog?
My blog is called Light in Grey Places, and because I'm British, I spell grey with an E. I really thought that one through. And what's really frustrating is that the actual domain is called something else. So it's www.workthegreymatter.com, as in think about it or think about the grey issue. So I call it Work the Grey Matter.
EY again, the grey, right?
Yeah, EY. So that's where I write about hope and sex and the Bible, just because it's kind of those three topics, and especially when those three topics combine.
Sorry.
Sorry, what was that?
Karen said those are her three favorite topics.
Sorry, I mean to interrupt you, but I said those are my three favorite topics. The Bible, hope, and sex.
Well, yeah, okay. So yeah, the Bible, hope, and sex. So I try and like write where those three kind of coincide. I do love the Bible, and it gets mistreated and misinterpreted so often.
Goodness. That's an understatement.
And also, it can be difficult at times. It's like there are some very scary and very violent passages in the Bible, and we need to be real about those. And I also have a sister site that I put sort of devotional content on. So this is just me and my creative writing about different parts of the Bible. So I have like a poem series on the fruit of the Spirit, and like, you know, for Easter and Christmas, and I just write something every week that's creative, that is inspired by something from the Bible. So
that's great. Awesome. I'm excited to read it. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's so nice to meet you. And Karen, we are not turning this into a sex podcast. I'm sorry to break the news to you.
I didn't.
The Gregoire's got that covered.
We can talk about it now and then. No,
thank you. I really one once in a while.
I really appreciate your blogs too. I wanted to say, and thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's so nice to meet you.
Yeah,
thank you, and you.
Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening, and until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.